Yes, Wednesday morning Q&As. That's what I'm doing today. Hi, everybody. Adam Savage. I'm here in my cave on a beautiful Wednesday. It is 4:20 in San Francisco. Big holiday for us here in the city. And I'm answering some questions from tested patrons. And today's question comes from Justin Ashcraft and says, any tips on weathering leather? I just bought a new leather laptop bag and it looks too clean. Oh, I feel you, Justin. I want it to look more Indiana Jones-esque. Well, everything I'm going to describe, I don't think there is a way to distress leather, right? There's all sorts of different kinds of leather, chrome tanned leather, veg tanned leather, surface color or color that goes all the way through. All of these yield different kinds of weathering techniques. So what I'm going to give you is some instruction in how I would creep up on such a project. Most famously, I want to tell you that the first Indiana Jones Raiders coat that Harrison Ford wore on day one of filming had been weathered by Deborah Nadoolman Landis the night before by the hotel pool using a Swiss Army knife, scraping the edges of the collars and the sleeves to get those worn down parts. I believe it was a Herbert Johnson jacket. The difficulty they had was that Raiders was originally supposed to star Tom Selleck, who was a giant star at the time, a bigger star than Harrison Ford was. And Tom Selleck is also a giant, like he's 6'3" or something. And so they had all these costumes built for Tom, and this was when he couldn't get out of Magnum PI to go film Raiders, and so they hired Harrison Ford, who is smaller. Harrison is still a large and hale man, even in his 70s, man. He could take you, he could take me. But Harrison, I think, is like 5'11", and so they only had one jacket at the very beginning. So you want to weather a laptop bag, and it's made out of leather. You've got to test your techniques. There are multiple ones. You can use a Scotch pad. Hang on. This stuff. It comes in many different grades. I tend to like this aubergine shade. It's very fine, type A, very fine. It's the green part of your sponge. That is also totally sufficient. A new sponge is a great way, potentially, to add some scuff. And really what you want to do, the way leather weathers, is where a wrinkle is proud and has a premonitory, that tends to be where it gets wear and tear and it lightens up. So this is a key aspect of leather, is a light and dark mix. And you can accentuate, you can make some leathers, you hit them with Scotch pad and they'll immediately start to lighten up. Others, if they've been dyed all the way through, not so much. You may have to use a little acetone, or acetone I have found on a terry cloth rag also can work well to sort of take out some of the dye. But you got to be careful about it. You don't want to go too heavy with it. So on this front, it's like you want to start with some patch of your bag that you won't mind if you get it a little more dirty or you overdo part of the technique. My recommendation is you want to creep up on this slowly, 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 slowly. Frankly, I've had laptop bags that were new looking and I just kicked them across my floor for 20 minutes. Literally, I just got on them and scrunched on them and moved them around the floor and then tried to clean them up. I love that kind of technique. But as far as physical techniques, there's scratching down using Scotch-Brite, green, purple. You can use steel wool. You'll get different results from like a number 1 steel wool and a 000 steel wool. Those are both worth trying. And then if none of that is working, you can move to some leather dyes. And you could move to some, leather dyes aren't going to necessarily help you lighten the leather, but it will help you potentially darken the leather in places you want it darker. So what you might then do is take a leather dye that's like a dark brown. You might even dilute it with the solvent that dilutes it. There are acrylics, there are enamels, there are other stuff. They're like aniline dyes, I think. At any rate, and you could lay it on or spritz it on and then wipe off the high spots. That is a great way. So you're artificially creating light spots by making everything else darker. And by putting it on and then wiping it off, the wiping is actually taking care of the high spots. This can also be done with acrylic washes, which tend to be weirdly robust on leather. There are some Mandalorian costumers out there doing just the most magnificent work with subtle wearing, weathering using just acrylic paints, and 4 colors of acrylic paint, a little bit of burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, raw sienna, some white and black, and maybe a little bit of yellow. You don't need much, but you got to start with a patch that is not going to harsh your mellow if you have to look at it every day because you overdid it. That's a big one. If you can see the edge of the leather and it's not dark all the way through, it's going to make it easier because you can kind of do that sort of take off the top layer. And if you go too far, you can always bring it back with some leather dressing. You could always bring it back with a little bit of leather dye. If there's a Tandy leather in your town, that is always a great place to go for that kind of stuff. But I get a lot of my stuff on Amazon these days. Look, Justin, I know I'm not giving really specific instructions, but that's just because this is a philosophy of incremental steps to get it where you want. I would also take a look at just some old leather bags and make yourself a folder of some old leather bags to look at. I do this with every weathering project I do. I want to see examples that I'm hoping to get to. And sometimes I copy things directly, like a stain that's really weird. Sometimes I'll just borrow the stain from something and put it on a piece. But more often I'm looking sort of for the philosophy of how it's going to weather and what I feel like a proper weathering job is going to be. So gather your reference, choose a spot you don't care about, creep up on it, try a bunch of different modalities, and for something like that, it probably is going to take 2 complete passes to weather it. You'll do 1 pass and you'll put it over your shoulder and you kind of take a look and you'll wear it for a few days and then you'll be like, yeah, I think it needs a little bit more. I think it needs a little bit more. But my first step always for weathering something, put it on the floor, step on it, scrape it around. Get it, give it some more scars. When you do this, I would love to see pictures. So if you post pictures, we'll put them up. That would be really fun. Thank you so much for that question, Justin. If you'd like to know how to support us on the channel better than just going to our merch store, which would be delightful, you can become a tested patron and submit questions like this that I will answer. Instructions are in the instructions in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this, and I will see you next time.